Welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Evening Bible Studies with your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann. For more studies, visit our website at www.ebiblefellowship.org. And now, here's Chris McCann.
Hello and welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible study in the book of Genesis. Tonight is study number 16 in Genesis chapter 40, and we'll begin reading in verse 10. And in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head, and restore thee unto thy place, and thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand after the former manner when thou wast his butler. But think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon. And I'll stop reading there. Well, last time we were talking about the vine. We've already seen the vine can be a reference to Christ himself. I am the vine, ye are the branches. And it does speak of branches. In the vine were 3 branches. So, that's a definite possibility. And also we saw that the vine can point to Israel of the Old Testament and the corporate church of the New Testament. We went to Psalm 80, where we read, I have brought a vine out of Egypt. Let me go over there. Psalm 80, verse 8. Thou hast brought a vine out of Egypt. Thou hast cast out the heathen and planted it. The heathen would be the nations that inhabited the land of Canaan. The vine would be national Israel. Now, Egypt, of course, it was a historical place where the Israelites were servants, bondmen, bondwomen to Pharaoh. And after 430 years, the self-same day they came out, God delivered them. But that's a spiritual picture. And the coming out of Egypt is like coming out of the world in salvation, or in the appearance of salvation of those who entered into the churches and congregations, just as historically the overwhelming majority of the Jews who were delivered from physical bondage as slaves in Egypt, they perished in the wilderness due to unbelief. We read in the book of Hebrews in the New Testament. And so too, those who entered into the churches and congregations coming out of the house of bondage, spiritually speaking, overwhelmingly, the majority were unsaved. They were Christians in name only over the course of the church age. Many are called, few are chosen. And so the figure of establishing a vine or bringing the vine from Egypt and setting it up can be used of either the nation of Israel or the church. And we can prove that. Actually, last time, remember, we went to Isaiah 5. Well, I'll read a verse here, then we'll go to Isaiah 5, another verse in Psalm 80, or maybe a couple of verses. We read in verse 12, Why hast thou then broken down her hedges, so that all they which pass by the way do pluck her. The boar out of the wood doth waste it, and the wild beast of the field doth devour it. Return, we beseech thee, O God of hosts, look down from heaven and behold, and visit this vine and the vineyard which thy right hand has planted, and the branch that thou madest strong for thyself. It is burned with fire, it is cut down, they perish at the rebuke of thy countenance. Vine and a vineyard. Over in Isaiah 5, and also the hedge was said to be broken down. If we go to Isaiah chapter 5, we're going to read about the New Testament corporate church that God established as a vineyard to bring forth fruit. And fruit in the Bible identifies with salvation. The church was established so that people could become saved, the elect of God, that they would be saved by the early rain, the Pentecostal rain that would bring forth the first fruits unto God. Well, here in Isaiah 5, verse 1, it says, Now will I sing to my well-beloved a song of my beloved touching his vineyard. My well-beloved hath a vineyard in a very fruitful hill. I mentioned this last time. The Hebrew word translated as hill is translated as horn everywhere else. And you can find a couple of verses that speak of horn and salvation. For instance, 2 Samuel 22, verse 3, horn of my salvation. Luke 1, verse 69, has raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David. That would be Jesus himself, likened to the horn of salvation. So it's a very fruitful horn, and that's because it identifies with salvation. Fruitfulness and salvation go hand in hand. And he fenced it and gathered out the stones thereof and planted it with the choicest vine, just like in Psalm 80. And he brought a vine out of Egypt and planted it, and built a tower in the midst of it, and also made a winepress therein. And he looked that it should bring forth grapes, and it brought forth wild grapes. Now, the word wild grapes is actually a word that identifies with a stink. There was a stench that was in the vineyard with the grapes. And verse 3, and now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge, I pray you, betwixt me and my vineyard. What could have been done more to my vineyard that I have not done in it? Wherefore, when I looked that it should bring forth grapes, brought it forth wild grapes. And this word is Strong's number 891. It's related to 887. That's used in Exodus 7. I'll turn over there. Exodus 7, verses 18 and 21. And you'll see the problem with this vineyard pretty quickly. Exodus 7, verse 18, and the fish that is in the river shall die. This is when the Lord turned the rivers of the waters and the rivers of Egypt to blood. And the fish that is in the river shall die, and the river shall stink, and the Egyptians shall loathe to drink of the water of the river. And verse 21, and the fish that was in the river died, and the river stank, and the Egyptians could not drink of the water of the river, and there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt. Now you can imagine multitudes of dead fish that are remaining in the river turned to blood, and it is so bad. It is so bad. When you go to the supermarket and you bring the fish home, there can be a stinking smell. Well, imagine fish just left to rot. and to remain floating in the river. That's the word. That's the word. It's that type of awful stench that God is saying that the grapes have brought forth. When I looked at it, should bring forth grapes, brought it forth wild grapes, stinking fruit. The fruit is just ruined. It's ruined. And this isn't of course, same type of fruit, but it's a similar idea. As God explains in the book of Jeremiah, he tells us in Jeremiah 24 of two types of baskets of figs. And we read in Jeremiah 24, verse 1, Jehovah showed me, and behold, two baskets of figs were set before the temple of Jehovah. After that, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away captive Jeconiah, the son of Jehoiada, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, and the princes of Judah, with the carpenters and smiths from Jerusalem, and had brought them to Babylon. Now, remember the historical onslaught of King Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians against Judah, against Jerusalem, was a spiritual picture. It's a historical parable that taught of God's end time plan to loose Satan so that he would come against the camp of the saints. And, Judah and Jerusalem represents the New Testament church, come against the camp of the saints, overcome them, and be victorious and take his seat. Satan take his seat in the temple, the churches, showing himself he's God. That's what this is telling us, that these two baskets of figs are before the temple of Jehovah after Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away the Jeconiah, the king of Judah, and princes and so forth, and carpenters, smiths, and brought them to Babylon. So that is really revealing after the loosing of Satan. At the point of the end of the church age, the Spirit of Christ has departed from the church. Satan's spirit has entered in, and now we have two baskets of figs, baskets of figs that are the Lord will use to instruct us concerning his people who are alive at that time of great tribulation when judgment begins at the house of God. In other words, us, we who have gone through that period of time. And so it goes on in verse 2, Jeremiah 24:2. One basket had very good figs, even like the figs that are first ripe, and the other basket had very naughty figs, which could not be eaten. They were so bad. The word naughty is the word evil. Evil figs, of course, we've all experienced. It happens to me. I like blueberries, and you get that pint, and after a couple of days, you take some off the top, and there below, they have that white mold, and some are oozing out. Just can't eat them. They're bad blueberries. Well, here it's naughty or evil figs that God says they were so bad. They were so evil. Then said Jehovah unto me, what seest thou, Jeremiah? And I said, figs, the good figs, very good, and the evil, very evil. You see that how the word evil is in view here. The evil, very evil, that cannot be eaten. They are so evil. And again, fruit in the Bible identifies with people. Two baskets of figs two different kinds of fruit: good fruit, evil fruit. By their fruits you shall know them. See, it's people of the churches at the time of the end. The wheat and the tares. And keep in mind, Satan's Loose, 1988, God didn't open the scriptures to grant understanding to his people that it was time to flee the church because the church age was over for a little while, and so you see these two groups typified by the two baskets. And then in verse 4 again, the word of Jehovah came unto me, saying, Thus saith Jehovah, the God of Israel, like these good figs, so will I acknowledge them that are carried away captive of Judah, whom I have sent out of this place into the land of the Chaldeans for their good. For I will set mine eyes upon them for good, and I will bring them again to this land, and I will build them and not pull them down, and I will plant them and not pluck them up, and I will give them a heart to know me, that I am Jehovah, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God, for they shall return unto me with their whole heart. The good figs, what's God going to do with them? He says that he will, let me make sure I get the wording right. Thus saith Jehovah, verse 5 again, like these good figs, so I acknowledge them that are carried away captive of Judah, whom I have sent out of this place. This is the land of Judah, the land of the city of Jerusalem, the promised land. I have sent them out of this place. Depart out. Remember Luke chapter 21. It's been a while since we looked at these scriptures. Luke 21, where we read in verse 20, and when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies. That's what the Babylonians did. They compassed the city. They compassed it about. When ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter therein too, for these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. The days of vengeance for who? For Judah? No. God turned them into a proverb. He turned them into a proverb. 1 Kings 9, verse 6. And this is the parallel chapter. Luke 21 is parallel to Matthew 24. And in Matthew 24, the disciples, they asked Jesus the question, what shall be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? This has to do with the second coming of Jesus at the end of the world. The end stage of Earth's history began in 1988. 1988 was the 13,000th year of Earth's history and the end of the church age. And a few years later, in 1994, judgment officially began at the house of God, which is the church. And that's 1 Timothy 3, 15 and 16 that makes that statement, the house of God, which is the church. And so God here is pulling from, he's referring to the historical parable that is all the book of Jeremiah concerning the assault of the Babylonians against Judah, against Jerusalem. When you see Jerusalem compassed with armies, depart out of the midst and go to the mountains. Go to the mountains, just to show you that this is parallel, Matthew 24, and notice significantly what is in the context here in verse 15. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, that's Satan, spoken of by Daniel the prophet. Look it up. Look it up. It's not going to, that is, go to Daniel. God's referring to Daniel, and abomination of desolation is mentioned 2 or 3 times in Daniel. And in each instance that it's mentioned, it's the end. It's the end. I'll go back there just to prove it quickly. In Daniel, we read Daniel 11. Daniel 11, it says in Daniel 11, verse 31, and arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, that which is italicized. So it's just the daily, which is the light of the candlestick, and that would be Christ in the midst of the churches. They'll take away the daily, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate, and such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries, but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits, and they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword and by flame, by captivity and by spoil many days. Now when they shall fall, they shall be holpen with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries, and some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them and to purge and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. Abomination, desolation in the sanctuary, in the holy place, time of the end, time of the end. Or in Daniel 12, verse 9, and he said, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly. And none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Daniel 12:9, time of the end. Abomination, desolation, a couple of verses later. In Matthew 24:15, and earlier, Matthew 24, verse 3, and as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? That's the context of the whole chapter of Matthew 24, verse 15. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet in the time of the end, stand in the holy place, and that's the church. It's not Israel. This is the time of the end, and Israel over in the Middle East plays no part. The only part they played was their restoration of being a nation again, which was like the fig tree in leaf, to be an indicator of you can know it's nigh. And that was it. That was it. Now, yes, there's war over there right now because it so happens that Israel is very divisive as far as the world's concerned, and God is dividing the world. So he has a nation that has historically been divisive, or as other nations have viewed them at least, and he is using the warfare there to divide the world, like many things God is using to bring to pass division in the nations, because that's characteristic of Judgment Day that we're in. But here, abomination spoken of by Daniel, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. The corporate church that is Judea. Go to God, that the mountains typify the mountains. I think it's Psalm 125, round about Jerusalem, as God is round about Mount Zion, or something similar to that. But going back to Jeremiah, I'd like to finish reading this before we run out of time. Jeremiah 24. Okay, those who go into captivity and they've been sent by God. God has commanded, go to captivity. Go to captivity. Again, them that are, verse 5, are carried away captive of Judah, whom I have sent out of this place into the land of the Chaldeans, Babylon, for their good. That's a picture of the world. Leaving Judah is, you hear the church age is over. Judah represents the church. God says, go to the world, get out of the church, depart out, go to the mountains, go to God himself, which means go to the Bible, but don't no longer or any longer go to church. And these are the ones, you can read the language, it's just wonderful blessing. Then in verse 8, and as the evil figs, the bad fruit, by their fruit, now that verse has been fulfilled. The church, those who remain, it's the bad fruit. By their fruit we know them, because they disobeyed the commandment of God to leave and depart out, thereby showing their character in the separation of wheat and tares, which they were, and unfortunately it was the tares. And as the evil figs which cannot be eaten, they are so evil. Surely thus saith Jehovah, so will I give Zedekiah the king of Judah and his princes and the residue of Jerusalem that remain in this land, and them that dwell in the land of Egypt, and I will deliver them to be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth, for their hurt to be a reproach and a proverb, a taunt and a curse in all places whither I shall drive them. And I will send the sword, the famine, and the pestilence among them, till they be consumed from off the land that I gave unto them and their fathers. God's judgment on the church, God's curse upon the churches and congregations, the people, the unsaved within the churches and congregations. It's all bad. It's terrible. It's terrible, and it continues. And people are very, very few anymore, but over these days, since May 21, 2011, numbers of true believers have gone back to this location to indicate what type of fruit they are, unfortunately, tragically. Well, I think that's all we're going to have time for right now. Lord willing, when we get together, we're going to look more at the 3 days. And I think, that this is something that has blessed me in studying, and I hope it'll be a blessing for you too.
Thank you for joining us for eBible Fellowship's Evening Bible Studies with your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann. For more studies and information, visit our website at www.ebiblefellowship.org. Until our next Bible study, may the Lord's perfect will be done.